So you're in business or you want to start a business and you hear that you should have a business plan. Do you even need to have that business plan? This is the Kawartha Small Business Podcast, and we've got business conversations for the Kawartha commute. I'm Brian Rump from U Group.
And I'm Matt Garrity from Matty G Digital. So, Brian, do I actually need a business plan?
The answer is both no and yes. Um, like everything, it's not cut and dry. I think it depends. That's the magic answer for everything. Um, I will let you in on one of my closely held secrets, and that is for several years, I was a commercial account manager with Bank of Montreal. And what I did all day, every day was lend money to businesses.
Mm.
And I want you to guess how many formal business plans I looked at. And to give you some context, I lent out what probably amounted to, tens of millions of dollars to hundreds of companies, all, Kawartha Lakes and a little bit maybe outside of that would be the area. So, how many formal business plans do you think I looked at through
I,
that time?
I don't want to be a wiener, but I would want you to better define formal.
Okay. So, um, some sort of file or piece of paper
A piece of paper?
that
Okay.
that says business plan with something on it and has some coordinated stuff documented
Does a
in some kind of a
cocktail
package.
napkin count as
Yes, a
paper?
cocktail napkin would count.
I would assume that every person that goes to the bank for a loan has to have a business plan. But now that we're playing this game, honestly, like I want to say then half, but even that probably is too high. You have to figure if you lend out 100 applicants money, or you reviewed 100 applicants, I don't know, like less than 10%.
So the answer, and I love this, is I might be a little bit wrong, but probably less than five
Oh my!
in terms of something that's put together. Uh, a few of those are people who worked with brokers who were uh, they were gas stations. We'll say they're gas stations, and they were well put together plans that were being shopped around to different banks. So you get a binder; it's full of basically everything you expect to ask for during the process. Um, another one was somebody who was trying to buy a franchise business, so it was like a put together plan, but for the most part, most people did not have a plan. And this is where I think the reality of small business is I think it's a good idea to have some level of plan, but most don't. If you're a bigger business, I think it's definitely good to have a business plan, but it's not mandatory. And I think we talk about it as if it's a mandatory thing, or people say, "Oh, you're going to the bank, you're going to have your pitch together and your loan, and the banker's going to look at you and say, "Oh man, that was such a great pitch. Here you
Yeah.
go, have some money." The reality, and I think there will be a whole Kawartha Small Business podcast episode or series on financing your business at some point. But most people coming in, if you're borrowing to start a business, it's because you already have some net worth and some savings that you're going to be borrowing from that, and it will largely be based on that. It's not going to be based on your business. Banks typically don't fund a business until at least 2 or 3 years in. And even then, for most small businesses, it's heavily based on the owner of that business and their sort of record and credit and ability to generate. income. And at that point, there is sort of a business plan, but in my experience, it was usually me putting it together for the client after asking them a lot of questions.
Right.
Uh, so I think where it's helpful and why I say you need some kind of business plan, it's really important to go through the process of it, even if you maybe don't sit down and document everything along the way, but you have to think through um, some of the different elements of the plan if you're going to be successful.
For sure. So I would say that I think I would assume, but as I've already learned in 5 minutes talking to you about assumptions of business plans, because I was one of those people that would assume you go into the bank and it's like Dragon's Den, Shark Tank, and you're like pitching and you need to know your numbers and they're shouting at you for not knowing precise numbers and all that kind of stuff. And at the end, you hand over your business plan. Um, I assume that every business owner has a plan, one way or another. The problem is, I don't think it's formal, and like, gosh knows where it is. It's like when I started my business, I have a business plan somewhere, I think. You can't see me if you're listening how big my smile is because I know how ridiculous what I just said was.
Yeah.
But like I had pieces of stuff everywhere. I had like an elevator pitch. I had here are my services. I had a page on like things that make me unique and a page on competitors. I don't pay too much attention to competitors, but um, I think every business owner has a plan. I think the problem is it's not formal.
Yeah. And that's where I want to draw that distinction. And I think, most people there's a reason you're getting into business. And especially in a smaller town, a small business, usually it's either, some sort of retail store or it's a service that something about. So you've been in the business, you've spotted a need for it. So you're going to have a base of knowledge. Where I think you need to seek out being challenged is expanding that a bit or getting tested on it. So I do like the idea of business planning, workshops or researching elements of a business plan. But the actual document itself, there are people who will put a lot of weight into that,
Mm,
is not um, super important, in my personal opinion. Um, I think there comes a point in every business where it makes sense to create, I call it like a base level document in case you're going for, more funding from either, a bank, especially grants. A lot of grant programs will ask you for you to, attach a copy of your business plan or your marketing plan. Um, if you're talking to investors, then they might want to see something documented to look at. But most small businesses don't need that much money where they're
right.
going out and seeking it. Your investors are probably not external investors. They're probably like friends and family or people who are going to maybe trust you a little bit more, or they'll walk you through and talk to you about your numbers and different things. We could get into a whole other conversation on lending money to family
Yeah.
or businesses, but just in terms of the business plan, one of the things I just want people to know is that everyone thinks everyone else has one and no one has one, and like some people feel bad about, oh no, I don't have like a formal business plan, I must not be a good business owner.
It's
But
really funny you say that because I get that in so many conversations with people where I start asking them about marketing stuff in the first conversation. And they're like, oh, yeah, I've got a business plan or I've already got like a marketing plan. And I always want to be like, do you? Do you
yeah,
actually? Are you just saying that because you're embarrassed? Because I didn't have a business plan, like a formal business plan for 8 to 10 months into my business.
yeah. I think starting up, it's sometimes the wrong time to do it. Now I do think if you it's more important to have something documented and to make sure you're going through the elements of the plan if you have a partner in your business, to make
Sure.
sure
Oh
you're
yeah.
on the same page of what your vision is, you know, what you're planning to do.
Great
Um,
point.
the other good way and a reason to document something as well is, understanding your market, the need, sort of why you're deciding that this is a business you want to do, because you are going to get punched in the face at some point and fail at something, and all is going to be you feeling like it's lost. And you can open it up, look at it, and remind yourself there's a reason why you're in that business, you decided to do it. So as that sort of roadmap, that stress reliever, is where I recommend writing something down. um, some people just don't like writing stuff down, and that's okay too. Or they don't put it all in one big fancy document. It could be um, different documents for different things you've thought about, or you keep a journal or something that's just for your business. So that could
Yeah.
work as well. But it's not always a big formal plan. Um, and the other note is, if you make that formal plan for like a bank or for someone, they're going to tear it apart anyway.
Mm.
Uh, so you don't want to overthink some of the writing, if that makes sense. I've had somebody I know talking about spending like dozens of hours wordsmithing some of the paragraphs in their business plan that nobody's going to read. Uh, Even if it's a banker, they're going right to your finances, and then they're going to test to see if it's realistic. And most of them know the industry, so they're going to be able to tell right away if you're on track or not, with some of the financials. And personally, I hate, um, I like the exercise of like projecting cash flow, and I like the exercise of the business owner knowing exactly what it's going to cost them to run the business, how much cash they're going to need, figuring out how much revenue they need to have. But in terms of scrutinizing like projections and stuff like that, they're always going to be way wrong.
Sure.
So there's not an overemphasis on it. Mostly, for me, it's that act of knowing what that magic number is you need to bring in. And then where I would link it to a marketer like you is, okay, you start up, you turn your lights on, you need 10 grand a day in sales to survive. What marketing do you need to do to get there? Um,
Yeah, for sure. And I found that to be the most interesting part of doing the business plan in the end was all the great verbiage I was able to pull out of my own business plan, because I guess I love talking about myself, especially in writing, I guess, all of a
oh
sudden.
yeah,
And then I recognized, like, man, this was written like kind of nice. But then I got to the point where I recognized like there was stuff in there where I was talking about myself and explaining why I unique and better than other people and all this kind of stuff, where I was able to pull a lot of that stuff and use it for my own marketing purposes, which
yeah.
was really cool.
And that's a good, a good point too, in going through that exercise. And that's where, I would say, you don't need it, but it helps with your marketing, right? It helps clarify your message, helps you know exactly what you're doing. When I work on grants, a lot of times, again, of all the grants that I've written, and this is where, tens of millions of dollars, well, a lot of money in grants and a lot of different programs. Most of those businesses don't have business plans either,
Right.
or marketing plans. So I would end up writing them all sort of specifically for the
Hmm.
grant. Sometimes we would patch it together from some other stuff. Other times it would be, what can we pull from their website or their marketing
Yeah.
and use some of that language. So, again, when you're starting up or when you're planning things out, it's really hard to get everything right. But if you serve those dual purposes, it's really helpful.
Sure. And the thing that I found most surprising when I did my business plan was we were given a template. I was doing it as part of a grant program, but I was given the business plan template. And then I started looking at other business plan templates, and there's lots out there. There's an
There's
infinite
so
amount. And that's what I found a bit confusing. And honestly, I think the last how long we've been talking here, we've been speaking a bit vague in ways where we said like, well, put down this element and talk about this plan. Can you maybe describe or explain what specific elements you're talking about need to be in a business plan?
yeah. So it's a great question because there is no perfect business plan, and everybody who reviews them or is going to advise you on it is going to have their bias for plan formats that they like. Um, and it really does depend on your industry, what you're doing, what's more important. One of my favorite ones is just a one-page business plan, and it's like, what do I offer? Like, very specifically, what pain am I solving?
Right.
Um, who are my target customers? And how do I make money? Like, those are some of the basic ones. Um, for me, it's about, whenever I go to write a business plan, I still always Google and look for different templates and formats to see if there's something new. I pull from different ones. I typically will have a heading and then talk about it. And my favorite types to write, and I've done this for a few clients, is just they want me to help write them a business plan. I don't know the business that well, so I just start asking questions, and I'll make up like a 10-page document. Really, that's just questions I have about the business and then the answers that I find or discussing it, so people know, what the barriers are. The biggest ones are marketing. You know, every business needs marketing. Who is your client? You can't come out of the gate, or even if you're in a business, blasting stuff out to everybody. So you need to really get in the head of your client and know, what it is they want, what their habits are, who they are. And, lots of marketers can take you through different questions. And then the other is finance. And with
Sure.
finance, I look at, how much cash do you need to open the doors? Then how much cash do you need to run the business? And that lets you know how much, you need to bring in. And running the business includes things like paying yourself. So, there's a few steps. So there's going to be startup cash that you need. You got to be ready to open. So depending on your business, that will be, you know, Matty G Digital probably didn't need a lot of cash to get off the ground. But if I'm opening a cafe and I'm leasing four walls in a building that doesn't have bathrooms or a kitchen or furniture or any of that stuff, I might need, a couple $100,000
Yep.
in leasehold improvements, equipment, inventory, all of that stuff just to turn the lights on. And then I'm going to need money to pay my utilities, hydro, employees, you know, more purchases of inventory. Like you need, and, to pay yourself. So you just need to know those numbers as close as you can to get to them. Uh, it doesn't need to be an accounting exercise. I've seen people scrutinize, line by line, where someone says, $100 a month for cell phone. And then it's like, well, actually, I think you could get a deal for, 75. And it's like, well, that doesn't matter. You just don't want to be way under
Right.
on some of those. So, you need to have that realistic idea. And I think that's where almost all the failure in business comes from, is not enough sort of cash in your business to start, or you don't understand the amount that you need and how hard that is to get sort of out of the gate, and then not knowing or being surprised at how much it costs to run the business.
For sure. I'm just looking at my business plan here, and it's kind of funny. Maybe it's just my marketing brain, and it wasn't a template specifically for marketing or companies that were in marketing, but every little section of this business plan relates back to marketing, and we can use it for marketing purposes in one way or another. Not to rapid fire at people right now, but just again, like the elements that we talked about, the things that we need to include, the things that we need to plan for in this business plan. And again, like it's not perfect, but it's effective, I suppose, and it's a good starting point. So, things like, of course, like a very simple summary of your business, like what do you do
Yeah.
specifically? Talking about customer segments, so define your audience and who you're selling to. Talk about the product or service offerings that you have, talking about, in this case, it was three problems that the customer or the audience is having. So address those specific pain points that Brian mentioned. And you can mention the specific solutions that you have for those. Talking about what makes you unique, your service is unique, your product unique. Talking then about marketing channels. So, are you going to sell stuff on Google? Are you going to sell it on social media, etc.? Cost structures, revenue streams, a lot of the stuff that Brian talked about financially. And then, like, a bit of an action plan on how to execute from there. So, I think it's a fine template. I've seen it in other cases. It maybe gets a little bit more in depth or in the weeds. This one was like really good, high level, wasn't too long. Ended up being like 22 pages, but it wasn't
Yeah,
too
they can
long.
get away from you, and that's okay too if you're going through and answering those questions, and like um it gets out of your way. Where I would just caution the listeners is, and why I like the idea of, like, you need to go through those steps. It could be a conversation, it could be conversations with your accountant or your marketer or people. When you document it, be just clear and concise. Don't get trying to be flowery language, or
Mm-hmm.
you know formal, or start speaking in, like, formal third person or something like that. That stuff doesn't matter. It's just walking through and thinking about it. I think where, if you go to ask for funding and someone's like, come back to me with a business plan, it's because you haven't asked yourself those questions yet.
Mm.
When I say I didn't have formal ones as a lender, there was a lot of business owners where they have nothing really documented, but if you go ask them, they just know their stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
you start asking them, who your customers are, who's coming in, they will tell you about it. And I would end up kind of writing it for the purpose of applying for the credit. Um, but they didn't always sort of write that down themselves.
Sure.
Same with, some people don't know their numbers financially, and that's where, again, you need to learn how to learn your numbers, um, especially if your level investment going in is high, or it's going to have high operating expenses to keep you going. You definitely need to do more due diligence there and more thinking on it. If you don't have a lot of cash at stake to start up and operate, then you don't need to put as much focus um, there, at least to start. And then you can always, get into some planning later.
So, retail businesses, businesses that have inventory would probably be more likely to need a business plan right away.
I think so. You at least really need to know um, the consequences of not understanding things like inventory, how to manage it. People get surprised as well at how much it costs for your type of business. So, do you need inventory of $1 million? Do
Mm.
you need inventory of a couple $100? It's you know every business is going to be different. I've had customers that had very small retail footprints, but the nature of what they had was like it was $1 million in inventory, um, and you wouldn't have guessed it when you walk in. And then other people, are able to, get deliveries every few days, turn stuff over faster. So what they're keeping in stock is not very much. If you look at bakeries, it's like flour and sugar is
Right.
like your inventory, right? And depending how much storage you have, you might be getting deliveries every few days. So you don't really have a huge amount, but really understanding sort of how that cycle is going to work for you. Yeah. All righty. Any other thoughts on business plans?
No, I guess kind of just to tie it all up and summarize uh, everything that you kind of mentioned, and my thoughts are like, I know we all as business owners have these ideas and have these little notes scattered across our phone or post-it notes or desk somewhere, but it is probably ideal for all of our peace of mind, whether it's now or in the future, to get some sort of plan together in completion. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like taking all our little notes that we have everywhere and having like one document that we're adding to constantly. And it doesn't need to be static. It's something that we can continue to add to and let it evolve and grow. Just making sure it's all sort of in one place and out of our brains and on paper, because it makes it a lot easier to follow things as we try to progress and stay along a specific road and path.
Yeah, I love that. Something that is a living document. It could be a document, it could be a file folder that you just dump a bunch of documents in and
True.
every now and then organize it a bit. But, again, yeah, ask yourself the questions, walk through the exercises, and, you're going to be fine. But, number one, don't stress out because you don't have a formal one and that you think everybody has one.
Absolutely not.
Um, it's dynamic for everybody. And you know what? If you need help making one, reach out to us. I think we would love to talk to people about, their business plans.
Definitely.
Between Matt and I, we could probably help you create a pretty awesome one.
For sure. Definitely.
All right, awesome. So that sounds like an episode to me. Thanks everyone for listening. Again, if you want to talk about this some more, reach out and we will set it up.